Sometimes the very thing you're running from is the only thing that can save you. Maria Santos pressed her face against the rusted chain-link fence surrounding the abandoned Los Angeles Coliseum, rain streaming down her cheeks like the tears she refused to shed. 3 months without work, an eviction notice taped to her apartment door, and her 8-year-old daughter asking why they couldn't afford groceries anymore. Desperation had driven her to break into the place where dreams once lived and died. But Maria knew something about this crumbling stadium that others didn't, something her father had whispered to her the night before he died, in that accident 22 years ago. Hidden beneath the Olympic rings rusting in the California storm lay secrets worth more than money, secrets that powerful people had killed to protect. As she slipped through a hole in the fence, her gymnast's instinct still sharp, despite the years, Maria couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't just trespassing on abandoned property. She was walking into a trap that had been set for her long before she was born. What if everything she thought she knew about her father's death was a lie? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The wire cutters slipped in Maria's rain-slicked hands as she widened the gap in the fence. 22 years of buried memories clawed at her mind, her father's calloused fingers tracing patterns on her palm in the darkness of her childhood bedroom, his voice barely a whisper. "Remember this, mija." Section 12. Tunnel entrance. 3rd pillar from the east wall. She'd thought it was just another one of his stories. The kind maintenance workers tell their daughters about the famous places they clean. Now, crouched in the mud with $43 to her name, and an eviction notice burning in her back pocket. Those whispered words felt like prophecy. The Colosseum loomed before her like a concrete cathedral, its arches black against the storm-bruised sky. Security lights had been dark for years, budget cuts leaving the 1984 Olympic venue to rot in plain sight. Maria squeezed through the fence, her lean frame, still gymnast tight despite a decade of double shifts and ramen dinners, moving with practiced silence. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the faded Olympic rings painted on the stadium's facade. For a moment, she was 12 again, watching her father unlock service doors with keys that jangled like wind chimes, following him through corridors that smelled of glory and industrial cleaner. He'd worked here during the Games, part of the invisible army that kept the Olympic dream running. He died 6 months later when his car skidded off Mulholland Drive in the rain. Just like tonight's rain. Maria shook off the chill and focused on the building's shadow-wrapped perimeter. Section 12 sat on the stadium's north side, where homeless camps had sprouted and died over the years, leaving behind shopping carts and tarps like urban tumbleweeds. She found the service entrance exactly where memory promised, a reinforced door marked with warnings about trespassing and prosecution. The lock had been broken for months. Maria slipped inside. The tunnel stretched ahead like a throat, emergency lighting casting everything in sickly green. Her footsteps echoed despite her efforts to stay quiet. This wasn't just desperation driving her forward. It was the same instinct that had carried her through routines on the balance beam, that split-second calculation between safety and the only move that would stick the landing. Emma's face flashed in her mind. 8 years old with Maria's dark eyes and stubborn chin, asking why they had to eat cereal for dinner again. Why Mommy looked so tired. Why the man at the grocery store said their card didn't work anymore. Every question a small knife turning in Maria's chest. 3 pillars. The 3rd, from the east wall, stood apart from the others, its base wrapped in shadows that seemed deeper than they should be. Maria ran her hands along the concrete, feeling for anything unusual. Her fingertips found what her father's whispered directions had promised. A section of wall that gave slightly under pressure, as if the mortar had been carefully weakened. She pressed harder. A panel shifted inward with a grinding sound that made her freeze, listening for footsteps or shouts that never came. Beyond the panel lay darkness that her phone's flashlight couldn't fully penetrate. A narrow maintenance shaft, just wide enough for one person. Her father's voice echoed across the years. Sometimes the greatest treasures hide in the places no one thinks to look. Maria squeezed into the shaft, her breath coming short in the confined space. The passage angled downward, running beneath the stadium's foundation. After 20 feet, it opened into a wider tunnel lined with pipes and electrical conduits, the stadium's hidden circulatory system. And there, set into the tunnel wall like a bank vault door, was something that shouldn't exist. The steel door bore no markings except for a small embossed symbol, 5 interlocking rings, Olympic rings. But these weren't faded or weathered like the ones painted outside. These were crisp, deliberate, official. A lock that looked far too sophisticated for an abandoned building secured the entrance. Maria's hands trembled as she reached for the combination dial, her father's final words surfacing from memory's depths. "Your birthday, Mija. Always your birthday. 0 to 4 to 1 to 7 to 8 to 9. April 17th, 1989. The lock opened with a soft click that seemed to echo through 22 years of questions and sleepless nights. The door swung inward on silent hinges, revealing a room that stole her breath. Medals, hundreds of them, arranged on display cases that lined the walls. Gold, silver, bronze, some still bearing ribbons, others mounted like museum pieces. But these weren't replicas or commemorative pieces. The weight in her hands when she lifted one, the specific heft of precious metal, told her these were real. Olympic medals, stolen Olympic medals. A card table in the room's center held manila folders thick with documents. Maria opened the first file with hands that had steadied on countless balance beams but now shook like leaves. Names, dates, photographs, and there, paper-clipped to a typewritten report, dated October 1999, was a picture of her father. Luis Santos, maintenance supervisor, had discovered something he shouldn't have, and according to the documents spread before his daughter, he hadn't died in an accident. He'd been murdered. Thunder crashed overhead as Maria realized she'd found more than treasure. She'd found the truth, and it was going to destroy everything. Maria's hands shook as she photographed every document with her phone, the camera flash illuminating her father's face in stark black and white. 22 years of believing he died because of wet roads and bad luck crumbled with each page she turned. The files detailed a systematic theft operation spanning decades, medals stolen from Olympic museums, private collections, even athletes themselves. Her father had stumbled onto it during routine maintenance and made the fatal mistake of trying to go to the authorities. The storm's fury matched the chaos in her mind as she stuffed 2 gold medals into her jacket pockets, just enough to cover rent and groceries, she told herself, not enough to be missed from this vast collection. But even as she sealed the vault and retraced her path through the tunnels, Maria knew she couldn't simply sell the medals and pretend this had never happened. The truth about Luis Santos had claws, and it wouldn't let go. By the time she reached her apartment in Boyle Heights, dawn was breaking gray and merciless over the city. The building's paint peeled like old scabs, and the lobby smelled of industrial disinfectant and broken dreams. Maria climbed 3 flights of stairs, each step heavier than the last, the weight of the medals in her pocket, nothing compared to the burden of what she now knew. "Mommy." Emma's voice drifted through the thin apartment door before Maria could get her key out. Her daughter always woke early, a habit born from too many mornings when Maria had to leave for the breakfast shift at Mel's diner before most kids opened their eyes. "I'm here, baby." Maria forced lightness into her voice as she entered their studio apartment. Emma sat cross-legged on their fold-out couch in her frozen pajamas, dark hair sleep-mussed, clutching a bowl of dry cereal. No milk. Maria had forgotten they'd run out yesterday. The apartment was a study in making do, thrift store furniture arranged to hide water stains on the walls. Emma's artwork taped over cracks in the plaster. A dozen gymnastics trophies, Maria's old ones, displayed proudly on a shelf made from a board and cinder blocks, everything clean but worn thin, like their lives. "Where did you go?" Emma asked, and Maria's heart clenched. Her daughter was too young to master casual indifference, too old to accept Mommy had errands without question. "I couldn't sleep, so I went for a walk." The lie tasted like copper pennies. "Early bird gets the worm, right?" Emma giggled, a sound that could heal wounds or break hearts depending on the day. "You're silly, Mummy. Birds eat worms. You're not a bird." "No," Maria said, sinking onto the couch beside her daughter and pulling her close. "But sometimes I wish I could fly." The morning routine that followed was choreographed by necessity. Emma, as bowl washed and dried, backpack checked for homework Maria had helped with by lamplight the night before, lunch packed with whatever they had, peanut butter sandwich, apple slices, the last juice box. Each task a small victory against the chaos, always threatening to overwhelm them. Mrs. Chen from next door knocked at 7:30, right on schedule. The elderly woman watched Emma for the hour between when Maria left for work and when the school bus came, a kindness Maria repaid by carrying Mrs. Chen's groceries and checking that her oxygen tank connections were secure. "You look tired, Mija," Mrs. Chen said, studying Maria's face with the sharp eyes of someone who'd raised 6 children through her own share of hard times. "Just couldn't sleep. Another lie, easier this time. You know how it is." But Mrs. Chen's expression suggested she knew more than she was saying. The old woman had lived in this building for 30 years, had probably seen 100 single mothers cycle through its apartments, each carrying their own collection of secrets and small desperations. The walk to Emma's school took 15 minutes, time Maria used to prepare for another day of rejection. The want ads in her backpack had been circled and recircled until the paper was soft as fabric. Waitress positions, retail jobs, anything that would take someone whose resume had more gaps than a hockey player's smile. The gymnastics coaching certification she'd earned years ago gathered dust. Private gymnastics lessons were luxuries for families who lived in neighborhoods with names like Beverly Hills and Manhattan Beach, not Boyle Heights. At Jefferson Elementary's gates, Emma hugged her with the fierce intensity of someone who understood, on some cellular level, that their world was more fragile than most. "Love you, Mommy. Love you more, baby girl." Maria watched her daughter skip toward the building's entrance, backpack bouncing, and felt the familiar ache of pride and terror that defined motherhood. Emma was everything good in her life, everything worth fighting for. The medals in her pocket suddenly felt heavier. Standing there in the weak morning sun, surrounded by other parents heading off to jobs and lives that probably didn't require breaking into abandoned stadiums, Maria made a choice that would reshape everything. She pulled out her phone and started researching the names from the files. If her father had died trying to expose this conspiracy, then maybe his daughter could finish what he'd started, even if it destroyed them both. The first name in her father's files belonged to Detective Raymond Pierce, LAPD. 23 years on the force, commendations for service, and according to the documents Maria had photographed, a signature on the falsified accident report that had closed Luis Santos's case without investigation. Pierce was still alive, still working, and according to the department website, still assigned to the Olympic Division, a specialized unit Maria hadn't known existed until this moment. She stood outside Jefferson Elementary for 20 minutes, thumb hovering over Pierce's contact information, before the school bell's distant chime reminded her that other people's lives continued moving forward, while hers had fractured into before and after. Before she knew her father was murdered. After she decided to do something about it. The coffee shop on Cesar Chavez Avenue provided Wi-Fi and the kind of anonymity that came with being just another woman with a laptop and desperate eyes. Maria ordered black coffee she couldn't afford and found a corner table where she could spread out the printouts of her father's files. Each document felt like handling evidence from her own crime scene. The conspiracy was larger than she'd initially comprehended. Names connected to other names in a web that stretched from Los Angeles to Atlanta to Sydney, cities that had hosted Olympic Games where medals and artifacts had subsequently disappeared. Her father hadn't just stumbled onto a local theft ring, he'd uncovered an international operation that had been bleeding Olympic history for decades. And then her phone rang. Unknown number. Maria almost declined the call, but something made her answer. Maybe the same instinct that had guided her through the Colosseum's tunnels. "Maria Santos." The voice was male, gravelly, familiar in a way that made her skin crawl. "Who is this?" "Someone who knew your father. We need to talk." The line went dead. Maria stared at the phone, her coffee growing cold as the implications crashed over her. 22 years after Luis Santos's death, someone was watching his daughter. Someone knew she'd found the vault. Someone was making contact. Her hands shook as she gathered the printouts, shoving them back into her bag with movements that felt too fast and too slow simultaneously. The coffee shop's other patrons, students with textbooks, retirees with newspapers, mothers with strollers, suddenly seemed like potential threats. Any one of them could be watching her, reporting her movements to whoever had just called. The walk back to her apartment took 30 minutes instead of 15. Maria doubled back twice, ducked into a bodega to watch the street through its windows, and took a route that wound through alleys where surveillance would be harder. Skills she didn't know she possessed emerged from some buried part of her consciousness, as if her father had taught her more than maintenance tunnel locations and combination sequences. Her building looked different when she finally reached it, more exposed, less safe. The lobby's broken intercom system that had always been an annoyance now felt like a security vulnerability. The stairwell's dim lighting created shadows where anyone could hide. Even her own door seemed suspect, its locks suddenly inadequate protection against people who had murdered her father for asking the wrong questions. Inside the apartment, Maria barricaded the door with their kitchen table and pulled the curtains closed. The medals in her jacket felt radioactive now, evidence of her theft that connected her to a conspiracy that killed people who got too close. But selling them was no longer an option. They weren't just stolen goods anymore, they were proof, leverage, the only thing standing between her and the fate that had claimed Luis Santos. Her laptop screen reflected her face as she opened a new browser window, and Maria barely recognized herself. The woman looking back had her features but different eyes, harder, more focused, touched by the kind of knowledge that changed everything. She'd entered the Colosseum as a desperate single mother looking for something to sell. She was leaving this coffee shop as something else entirely. The second name in her father's files belonged to Dr. Margaret Chen, former Olympics medical coordinator, who had died in a house fire 6 months after Luis Santos's car accident. The third name was James Morrison, an IOC official who had suffered a fatal heart attack at age 38. The fourth was Angela Rodriguez, a security supervisor who had drowned during a family vacation. 4 people, 4 deaths, 4 accidents that weren't accidents. And now someone knew that Luis Santos's daughter had found the evidence they'd killed to protect. Maria's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Jefferson Elementary dismisses at 3:15. Emma walks to the corner of 4th and Soto to catch the bus home. Beautiful little girl. Looks just like her grandfather. The coffee cup slipped from Maria's hands, shattering against the floor in pieces that reflected the overhead lights like broken stars. Everything else, the eviction notice, the empty refrigerator, the job interviews she'd never attend, became background noise to the single crystalline truth that changed everything. They had found her. They knew about Emma, and Maria Santos was about to discover exactly what her father had died trying to protect. The coffee shop fell silent around Maria, except for the thundering of her own heartbeat. She stared at the text message until the words burned themselves into her retinas, then deleted it with trembling fingers, as if that could somehow undo the threat. But the knowledge remained. They knew where Emma went to school, knew her route home, knew exactly how to destroy Maria's world. She forced herself to breathe, to think past the panic clawing at her throat. 3 hours until dismissal. 3 hours to figure out how to protect her daughter from people who had orchestrated murders for over 2 decades. The medals in her jacket pocket suddenly felt like bombs waiting to explode. Maria's first instinct was to run, grab Emma from school, drive until her car ran out of gas, disappear into America's anonymous spaces. But where could a single mother with $43 in her checking account hide from an international conspiracy? How long before Emma started asking why they were sleeping in the car, why Mommy kept checking the mirrors, why they couldn't go home? Her phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. Running won't help. We know about the vault. We know what you took. Cooperation ensures Emma's safety. The trap revealed itself with crystalline clarity. They wanted the evidence back. The documents, the photographs, Probably the medals, too. Her father's murder had been about silencing a witness. Her situation was about retrieving stolen property. The difference might keep them both alive, or it might just mean they'd die more slowly. Maria closed her eyes and saw Emma's face from this morning, sleepy and trusting, worried about math homework and whether they'd have enough lunch money this week. Normal 8-year-old problems in a life that was about to become anything but normal. The weight of the choice pressed against her chest like a physical force, her daughter's safety versus her father's justice. The smart choice, the motherly choice, would be to return everything and pray they'd honor their word about Emma's safety. Give back the medals, delete the photographs, pretend the vault had never existed. Luis Santos would remain officially dead in a car accident. 4 other victims would stay buried with their secrets, and the Olympic theft ring would continue bleeding history for profit. But Maria knew better than to trust murderers' promises. She thought about her father working night shifts in the Colosseum's tunnels, probably hoping his maintenance job would eventually lead to something better for his family. Had he hesitated like this when he first discovered the medals? Had he weighed the risks against the potential rewards, measured his daughter's future against his own moral compass? The documents suggested he'd tried to do the right thing, contact authorities, expose the conspiracy through proper channels. His reward had been a rainy night on Mulholland Drive and a daughter who'd spent 22 years believing he'd simply lost control of his car. Maria's hands shook as she pulled up Emma's school contact information. She could call, claim a family emergency, have her daughter brought to the office where she'd be safe behind locked doors and administrative protocols. But that would only buy time, not solve the fundamental problem. People with government connections and decades of experience covering their tracks wanted something from her, and they demonstrated exactly how far they were willing to go to get it. The coffee shop's afternoon crowd grew thicker around her, teenagers sharing earbuds, business people typing urgently on laptops, mothers chatting while their toddlers played with toys. Normal people living normal lives, unaware that a woman at table 12 was contemplating whether to fight a conspiracy that had already claimed 5 lives or surrender to keep her daughter breathing. Maria tried to imagine explaining this to Emma. Remember how I told you Grandpa Luis died in a car accident? Well, actually, he was murdered by people who steal Olympic medals, and now they want to kill us too. The conversation was impossible, but so was pretending this would simply disappear if she cooperated. A phone displayed 2:47 p.m., 28 minutes until Emma's school day ended, until her daughter walked unknowingly into the crosshairs of people who treated human lives like accounting problems to be solved. 28 minutes to choose between the mother who would do anything to protect her child and the daughter who couldn't let her father's murder go unpunished. Maria Santos had spent her life making the safe choice, leaving gymnastics after her injury instead of fighting through rehabilitation, taking waitressing jobs instead of pursuing coaching opportunities, building a small, careful existence that couldn't collapse catastrophically. But safety was an illusion, she realized now. The careful life she'd built was crumbling anyway, and the people threatening Emma had taken that choice away the moment they murdered Luis Santos. She stood up slowly, leaving money on the table, and walking toward the door with steps that felt like crossing a bridge that would burn behind her. Outside, Los Angeles continued its indifferent sprawl under the afternoon sun, unaware that a single mother was about to declare war on forces that had been winning for 22 years. But first, she had to save her daughter. Maria's hands trembled as she fumbled with her car keys outside the coffee shop. The ancient Honda Civic coughed to life on the 3rd try, its engine noise joining the symphony of Los Angeles traffic that had become the soundtrack to her desperation. 26 minutes until dismissal. 26 minutes before Emma would walk out those school doors, unaware that monsters from her grandfather's past had crawled out of the shadows. The drive to Jefferson Elementary should have taken 12 minutes. Maria made it in 7, running 2 yellow lights and taking corners that made her tires squeal in protest. She parked across from the school's main entrance, engine still running, and pulled out her phone to call the front office. Jefferson Elementary. This is Sandra. Hi. This is Maria Santos, Emma Santos's mother. I need to pick her up early today. Family emergency. The lie came easier now, each deception making the next one feel more necessary. Oh, of course, honey. Is everything all right? No. Everything was the opposite of all right. Her father was murdered. She'd stolen evidence from an international conspiracy, and people who killed witnesses for a living had just threatened her 8-year-old daughter. Just family stuff. I'll be right in. Maria hung up and stared at the school building, its cheerful yellow walls and playground equipment suddenly looking fragile against the weight of what was hunting them. Children's laughter drifted from the windows, innocent sounds that belonged to a world where the biggest dangers were scraped knees and forgotten homework. Emma's world until this morning. Emma's world that Maria was about to shatter completely. The decision crystallized as she watched a group of third-graders chase each other around the monkey bars. She couldn't give the evidence back. These people had murdered her father, had spent decades stealing Olympic history for profit, and would certainly kill again to protect their operation. Cooperating wouldn't save Emma. It would just make them both loose ends that needed tying up. But fighting back meant abandoning everything. Their apartment, their neighborhood, the careful routine that had given Emma stability despite their poverty. It meant pulling her daughter out of school permanently, cutting ties with Mrs. Chen and the few friends they'd managed to make. It meant becoming fugitives from forces with resources and connections Maria couldn't even comprehend. Her phone buzzed with another text. 20 minutes, Maria. Don't make us wait. She deleted the message and made a call that felt like stepping off a cliff. Detective Pierce, Olympic Division. Maria's throat went dry. This was the cop who'd falsified her father's accident report, who'd helped cover up Luis Santos's murder for 22 years. His voice sounded ordinary, professional, like any other civil servant going through the motions of his workday. Not like someone who'd helped killers escape justice. I know about the vault, Maria said, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. I know what you did to my father. The silence stretched long enough for her to hear traffic in the background. The sound of a police station continuing its operations while Detective Pierce processed the fact that his past had just called to introduce itself. Who is this? Luis Santos's daughter. The one you left fatherless when you covered up his murder. Another pause. When Pierce spoke again, his voice had shed its professional courtesy, revealing something colder underneath. Meet me at the Coliseum. Maintenance entrance. 1 hour. No. I meet you nowhere. But I'll make you a deal. Maria's heart hammered against her ribs, but the words kept coming as if someone else was speaking them. I have copies of everything. Photos, documents, evidence that connects you and your friends to murders spanning 3 decades. Touch my daughter, and everything goes to the FBI, the media, every Olympic committee in the world. You're making a mistake. The mistake was yours, 22 years ago. Maria ended the call and immediately turned off her phone, removing the battery with fingers that barely functioned. No more tracking, no more threats via text message. Whatever happened next would happen on her terms. She walked into Jefferson Elementary with the measured pace of someone crossing a threshold she could never uncross. The hallways smelled like disinfectant and childhood, crayon shavings, apple juice, the particular mixture of chaos and hope that defined elementary schools everywhere. Normal smells from a normal place that Emma would never see again. Mommy! Emma bounced out of the principal's office with her backpack trailing behind her, face bright with the excitement that came from unexpected changes in routine. Mrs. Patterson said we have a family emergency. Are we going somewhere fun? Maria knelt down and pulled her daughter close, breathing in the scent of her shampoo and the lingering smell of the peanut butter sandwich from lunch. This was the last moment Emma would be truly safe, truly innocent, truly unaware that their lives had just become something else entirely. Yeah, baby girl, Maria whispered against her daughter's hair. We're going on an adventure. The lie felt like truth, and the truth felt like salvation. They walked out of Jefferson Elementary hand in hand, leaving behind the last remnants of their old life, and stepping into whatever came next. There was no going back now. The Honda Civic's engine ticked ominously as Maria pulled into the parking lot of the Walmart on Crenshaw Boulevard. She needed supplies for their new reality, but more importantly, She needed time to think while Emma remained distracted by the promise of choosing her own snacks for their adventure. The fluorescent lights inside felt harsh after the late afternoon sun, casting everything in the unforgiving glare of emergency decision-making. "Can I get the goldfish crackers? The big bag?" Emma skipped alongside the shopping cart, her innocent excitement a knife twist in Maria's chest. Her daughter had no idea they were shopping for life on the run, that the clothes and toiletries going into their cart might be all they could carry for weeks or months. "Whatever you want, baby." Maria grabbed a prepaid cell phone from the electronics section, paying cash and fighting the urge to look over her shoulder. Every middle-aged man in a baseball cap could be surveillance. Every woman pretending to examine shampoo bottles could be reporting their location. The paranoia felt both ridiculous and absolutely necessary. At the pharmacy section, Maria recognized the pharmacist from Emma's school pickup line, Mrs. Rodriguez, whose son was in Emma's class. A fragment of their normal life, intruding into this new nightmare. "Maria, how are you, honey?" Mrs. Rodriguez smiled warmly, then noticed the cart full of travel-sized everything. "Going somewhere nice?" The question hung in the air while Maria calculated responses. Mrs. Rodriguez was kind, trustworthy, the type of person who sent homemade cookies to school fundraisers. She was also exactly the kind of innocent bystander who could become collateral damage if the wrong people started asking questions about Maria Santos and her daughter. "Just a little trip," Maria managed, steering Emma toward the checkout lanes before more questions could follow. But Mrs. Rodriguez's friendly concern had crystallized something important. They couldn't simply disappear without a trace. People would notice Emma's absence from school, would ask questions that might draw attention to the wrong places. In the car afterward, Maria helped Emma organize her snacks while her mind raced through possibilities. They needed somewhere safe to stay while she figured out how to fight back against forces that had been covering their tracks since before Emma was born. A hotel would require credit cards that could be traced. Shelters would ask questions she couldn't answer honestly. Family wasn't an option. Maria's mother had died 3 years ago, and Luis Santos had been an only child. "Mommy, are we really going on an adventure?" Emma's voice carried a note of uncertainty now, as if she'd finally noticed the tension radiating from her mother, despite all attempts to hide it. "Yes, sweetheart, but it might be different than our usual trips." Maria met her daughter's eyes in the rearview mirror. "We might have to stay somewhere new for a while. Would that be okay?" Emma considered this with 8-year-old seriousness. "Like camping?" "Something like that." Maria started the engine, still unsure of their destination but knowing they couldn't stay parked much longer. Motion felt safer than stillness, even aimless motion. The new phone buzzed to life as they pulled onto the street. Maria had programmed only one number, the tip line for the FBI's art crime team. If she was going to declare war on a conspiracy, she needed allies with resources and authority, but first, she needed proof that would survive her potential death. She drove toward the central library downtown, its computer terminals offering the kind of anonymous internet access that couldn't be traced to her identity. Emma could do homework in the children's section while Maria uploaded scanned copies of her father's evidence to every secure server she could access. Cloud storage accounts, encrypted email drafts, hidden folders on public computers, a digital insurance policy that would ensure Luis Santos's murder investigation would survive even if his daughter didn't. "Are we going to the library?" Emma perked up, recognizing the route. "Can I get new books?" "All the books you want," Maria promised, meaning it. If these were their last few hours of normal life, Emma deserved to spend them surrounded by stories where good guys won and families stayed safe. The library parking garage felt like a concrete cave, its shadows offering the first genuine sense of safety Maria had experienced since leaving the coffee shop. Here, among students and researchers and homeless people seeking air conditioning, they could blend into the anonymous crowd of people using public resources for private purposes. But as they walked toward the entrance, Maria spotted a man in a dark suit speaking quietly into a phone near the circulation desk. He looked up as they approached, his gaze lingering just a moment too long on Emma's face. Maria's blood turned to ice water. They'd been found again. The rules of this new world became crystal clear. Nowhere was safe, no one could be trusted, and the people hunting them had resources she'd barely begun to understand. The real test was just beginning. Maria grabbed Emma's hand and pivoted away from the library entrance, her movement casual despite the adrenaline flooding her system. The man in the dark suit was already moving, his phone call ending as he stepped toward the main doors. "I forgot something in the car," Maria said loudly enough for nearby patrons to hear, her voice carrying the frustrated tone of any mother dealing with minor inconvenience. Emma started to protest, but something in her mother's grip made her fall silent. They walked back toward the parking garage at a measured pace, Maria's peripheral vision tracking the suited man's reflection in the glass doors. He wasn't following yet, but his position near the entrance meant they were effectively trapped. The garage had only one exit, and he could radio their location to whoever else was closing in. "Mummy, you're hurting my hand," Emma whispered. "Sorry, baby." Maria loosened her grip, but didn't let go. Think. The library had been the obvious choice, too obvious. These people had tracked her phone calls, her location, probably her entire digital footprint since she'd first entered the vault. They were always going to be one step ahead as long as she played by normal rules, which meant it was time to stop playing by normal rules. Instead of heading toward their car, Maria led Emma deeper into the parking garage, toward the section marked for library employee vehicles. The Honda's keys felt heavy in her pocket, along with the weight of everything they were about to leave behind. Their car, their last connection to their old life, would have to become another sacrifice to the gods of survival. "Where are we going?" Emma's voice echoed off the concrete walls, confusion replacing her earlier excitement about the adventure. "We're playing hide and seek," Maria said, scanning the employee parking area. There, a maintenance door marked authorized personnel only, probably leading to the library's loading dock or service corridors, the kind where we have to be really, really quiet. Emma nodded solemnly, her 8-year-old instincts finally registering that something serious was happening. She pressed closer to Maria's side as they approached the maintenance door, her earlier chatter replaced by the focused silence of a child sensing danger. The door was locked, but the frame was old enough that the security latch gave way with pressure that would leave Maria's shoulder aching later. They slipped through into a service corridor lined with industrial cleaning equipment and the electrical infrastructure that kept the library functioning. The smell of bleach and floor wax mixed with the hum of ventilation systems, the hidden arteries of a building most people never saw. Maria pulled out the prepaid phone and scrolled through her contacts, landing on a number she hadn't called in over a year. Rico Valdez had been her gymnastics teammate back when Olympic dreams seemed achievable, before her injury and her father's death had derailed everything. More importantly, he'd spent the last decade working as a stuntman, which meant he understood both physical risk and the kind of people who existed on society's margins. The call connected after 3 rings. "This is Rico. Rico, it's Maria Santos. I need help." The words came out in a rush, carrying the weight of their desperation. "Maria? Shit, I haven't heard from you since. What kind of help?" Through the maintenance door, Maria could hear footsteps in the parking garage, measured and purposeful. They'd found the Honda, the kind where you don't ask questions and forget this conversation happened. "I need somewhere safe to stay with Emma, just for tonight." The silence stretched long enough for Maria to wonder if Rico would hang up. Their friendship had been built on shared bruises and chalk dust, on the peculiar intimacy of training partners who spotted each other through dangerous routines. But that was a lifetime ago, before real life had intervened. "There's a storage unit complex in San Pedro," Rico finally said. "Industrial area, mostly closed after dark. Unit 247 has a broken lock. Been meaning to tell the manager but haven't gotten around to it. You didn't hear this from me." "Thank you." Maria memorized the address, already calculating how to get there without a car. "Rico? If anyone asks, I never heard from you." The line went dead. Emma tugged at Maria's sleeve, pointing toward voices echoing from the parking garage. Multiple voices, coordinated and professional. The man in the suit hadn't been alone. Maria scooped up Emma and headed deeper into the service corridor, away from the voices and toward whatever exit might lead them into the maze of downtown Los Angeles. Their Honda was compromised now, along with the last illusion that they could outrun this by staying within normal channels. Behind them, the voices grew more urgent. Someone had found the force door. The underground war for Luis Santos's legacy had officially begun, and his daughter was learning the first rule of guerrilla warfare. When the enemy controls the battlefield, you change the battlefield, even if that meant dragging an 8-year-old into the darkness with you. The service corridor stretched ahead like a concrete throat, swallowing the sound of their footsteps while amplifying Emma's increasingly ragged breathing. Maria counted doorways as they passed. Emergency exits, storage rooms, electrical panels, each one a potential trap or salvation. Behind them, the voices had multiplied, echoing off the parking garage walls with the systematic efficiency of a coordinated search. "Mommy, I'm scared." Emma's whisper carried the tremor of a child whose world had just shifted from adventure to nightmare. The game of hide-and-seek had lost its playful veneer, replaced by something that tasted like copper pennies and felt like drowning. "I know, baby girl. We're almost out." Maria's lie came automatically, the kind of protective deception mothers perfected without conscious thought. The truth, that they were trapped underground with armed professionals closing in from behind, belonged to the adult world Emma wasn't ready to inhabit. Not yet. Maybe not ever, if Maria could find a way to end this before innocence became another casualty. The corridor branched ahead, splitting toward what looked like a loading dock on the left and a stairwell marked street level on the right. Maria's gymnast training kicked in, the spatial awareness that had once navigated balance beams now calculating angles of escape. The loading dock might offer vehicle access, but it could also be a dead end. The stairwell promised street access but might deposit them directly into the arms of whoever was coordinating the search from above. Emma stumbled, her small legs struggling to match Maria's increasingly desperate pace. The Walmart bags rustled against Maria's shoulder, supplies for a life on the run that might end before it truly began. Goldfish crackers and travel-sized shampoo, the mundane provisions of their new reality, suddenly felt absurd against the backdrop of mortal danger. The voices behind them grew closer, professional, clipped communications that spoke of experience with exactly this kind of hunt. These weren't casino security guards or corrupt cops operating beyond their depth. These were specialists, and Maria was beginning to understand just how far out of her league she'd stumbled. Unit 3, loading dock secured, no visual. Copy. Unit 1, what's your status on the stairwell? The radio chatter echoed off the concrete walls, close enough that Maria could distinguish individual words. Too close. She pressed Emma against the wall beside the electrical panel, both of them frozen in the space between heartbeats, while heavy footsteps approached their position. This was it. The moment when everything her father had died protecting would either survive or disappear forever. The moment when Emma would either remain an innocent child or become something else entirely. The moment when Maria Santos would discover whether Luis Santos had raised a daughter capable of fighting the battles he died trying to finish. The footsteps paused directly on the other side of the electrical panel. Maria's hand found the main power switch, a heavy-duty lever that controlled lighting for this section of the building. Cut the power, create chaos in the darkness, use the confusion to reach the stairwell. It was the kind of desperate gambit that worked in movies and failed catastrophically in real life. But real life had already failed them. Real life was what had gotten her father murdered and left them hiding in a concrete maze beneath downtown Los Angeles. She met Emma's eyes and pressed a finger to her lips, then pointed toward the stairwell. Emma nodded with the solemn understanding of a child who'd learned to trust her mother's decisions, even when they stopped making sense. Maria threw the switch. The corridor plunged into absolute darkness, accompanied by shouts of surprise and the immediate crackle of radio communications requesting backup power. Emergency lighting flickered on after several seconds, casting everything in hellish red that turned the chase into something from a nightmare. They ran. Emma's hand gripped Maria's with the desperate strength of absolute terror, her 8-year-old legs moving faster than she'd ever moved in her life. Behind them, flashlight beams swept the corridor, while voices shouted coordinates and tactical updates. The stairwell door loomed ahead like salvation, its crash bar promising street level and crowds and the possibility of vanishing into the anonymous chaos of downtown Los Angeles. Maria hit the door with her shoulder. Emma pressed against her side, both of them tumbling through into a stairwell that smelled like urine and desperation. 3 flights up to street level, 18 steps per flight. Maria counted automatically, while her lungs burned, and Emma's breathing turned into sobs that echoed off the concrete walls. They emerged into an alley behind the library, late afternoon sun blinding after the red-tinted emergency lighting below. Traffic sounds and pedestrian chatter created the urban symphony that might mask their escape. Maria oriented herself quickly. They were 6 blocks from the metro station, 2 miles from the storage facility in San Pedro, and approximately 1,000 miles from anything resembling safety. The real ordeal was just beginning, and Maria finally understood what her father had known 22 years ago. Some fights chose you, regardless of whether you were ready for them. Maria pressed herself against the alley's brick wall, Emma trembling beside her as they caught their breath. The afternoon sun felt like a spotlight after the underground maze, every shadow a potential hiding place for enemies. They needed to move, but Emma's legs were shaking so violently she could barely stand. "Mummy, I can't." Emma's whisper broke into a sob that echoed off the narrow alley walls. Before Maria could respond, her phone buzzed with an incoming call. Unknown number. Her blood turned to ice as she realized her mistake. The prepaid phone Rico had called back on was traceable. She'd been so careful to avoid her regular phone, but the callback had created a digital breadcrumb leading straight to their location. She answered anyway, knowing silence wouldn't save them now. "Miss Santos." The voice was calm, professional, tinged with an accent she couldn't place. "You've led us on quite a chase." "Who is this?" "Someone who knew your father. Someone who tried to reason with him before unpleasant measures became necessary." A pause, filled with the distant sound of car engines. "You have something that belongs to us." Maria's hand instinctively moved to the messenger bag containing her father's evidence. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Please. We tracked your visit to the vault, your conversations with certain FBI contacts, even your touching reunion with Mr. Valdez. We know exactly what you took from that storage facility." The mention of Rico's name hit like a physical blow. They'd been watching her since the coffee shop, maybe since the moment she'd first entered the Olympic vault. Every move she'd made, every ally she'd contacted, had been anticipated and countered. "However," the voice continued, "we're prepared to be reasonable. The documents your father stole belong to a complex international investigation. Returning them through proper channels would benefit everyone involved." "Proper channels? Like the ones that got my father murdered?" Emma looked up at her mother with eyes wide with terror, finally understanding that this wasn't a game or adventure. The word "murdered" hung in the air between them like poison. "Your father made unfortunate choices. You don't have to repeat his mistakes." The voice hardened slightly. "Especially when you have so much more to lose than he did." The threat was crystal clear. Emma whimpered and pressed closer to Maria's side, her small body radiating the kind of fear that would scar her for life, if she survived long enough to carry scars. Maria's mind raced through options, all of them terrible. Run, and they'd be hunted forever. Fight, and Emma would become collateral damage. Surrender, and they'd both disappear like her father had disappeared, leaving nothing but official accidents and convenient explanations. "There's a black sedan at the mouth of the alley," the voice said. "Walk toward it slowly, and no one gets hurt." Maria peered around the dumpster and saw exactly what he'd described. A sleek vehicle with tinted windows, engine running, positioned to block their escape route. Professional, efficient, final. "Mummy, what do they want?" Emma's voice cracked with the last remnants of childhood innocence. "Everything," Maria thought. "They want everything we are, and everything we might become." "I need time to think," Maria said into the phone. "Time is exactly what you don't have. Miss Santos, Your daughter is 8 years old. She deserves to see 9. The line went dead. Maria stared at the phone, her father's legacy suddenly feeling like a curse rather than a gift. All her plans, the FBI contacts, the evidence uploads, the careful documentation, had been anticipated and neutralized. They'd been playing chess while she'd been playing checkers, and now Emma was paying the price for her mother's naivete. The black sedan's doors opened. 2 figures emerged, moving with the casual confidence of people who'd done this many times before. They weren't rushing because they didn't need to rush. The alley was a dead end, the library was compromised, and Maria Santos was exactly where they wanted her to be. "Run," Maria whispered, grabbing Emma's hand. "When I say go, we run toward the street and we don't stop." But Emma's legs finally gave out completely, her small body collapsing against the brick wall as 8-year-old terror overwhelmed 8-year-old endurance. She couldn't run anymore, could barely breathe anymore. The adventure had become a nightmare, and nightmares weren't supposed to be real. Maria gathered her daughter in her arms, messenger bags slipping from her shoulder to hit the alley pavement with a sound like bones breaking. 22 years of her father's careful planning reduced to scattered papers in downtown Los Angeles dirt. The figures approached with unhurried certainty, their faces hidden in afternoon shadows that seemed to swallow hope itself. Maria had lost everything: their safety, their freedom, their future. And worst of all, she'd lost her daughter's childhood to a war that had started before Emma was even born. The sins of Luis Santos had finally come home to roost. The figures stopped 3 feet away, close enough for Maria to see their faces. The woman was perhaps 50, silver-haired and elegant, wearing a tailored coat that probably cost more than Maria's monthly rent. The man beside her looked military, crew-cut, posture rigid, eyes that had seen too much and forgotten how to flinch. But it was the woman's voice that made Maria's blood freeze. "Hello, Maria. You look just like your mother." The accent was slight but unmistakable. The same cadence Maria had heard in her own voice sometimes, the rhythm her father had carried despite decades in America. The woman spoke with the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed, but underneath lay something else, something almost familiar. "You don't know me," Maria said, instinctively pulling Emma closer. "But I know you." The woman's eyes, dark brown, the same shade as Maria's own, held a sadness that seemed decades deep. "I've known you since before you were born, since before your father stole you away in the middle of the night and told you I was dead." The words hit like physical blows. Emma whimpered against Maria's chest, but the sound seemed to come from very far away. The alley, the chase, the scattered papers, everything receded except the impossible reality standing before her. "That's not possible. My mother died when I was 2. Cancer. Your mother," the woman said gently, "has been searching for you for 32 years. She reached into her coat, slowly, carefully, and withdrew a photograph. Faded, but unmistakable. A younger version of herself holding a dark-haired toddler with Maria's exact smile. Maria's legs nearly gave out. No, that's not. My father wouldn't have. Your father was a good man who made terrible choices." The woman's voice carried the weight of old grief. "Luis was my partner, Maria. Not romantically, professionally. We worked together for Interpol, investigating the theft of cultural artifacts. The Olympic medal conspiracy was just one case among dozens." The messenger bag lay forgotten at Maria's feet, its contents scattered, but suddenly irrelevant compared to this seismic shift in everything she'd believed about her life. "The assignment required deep cover," the woman continued. "Luis posed as a security consultant. I worked within the IOC itself. When you were born, we agreed to maintain the fiction until the case concluded. But Luis," her voice broke slightly, "Luis fell in love with the life we were pretending to live, with being a father. When the corruption network discovered our investigation, he panicked." Emma stirred in Maria's arms, looking up at her mother's face with confusion and growing fear. "Mummy? He took you and ran." The woman's eyes filled with tears she'd probably been holding back for 3 decades. Staged my death, created new identities, disappeared into American suburbia. I've been tracking you both ever since, but Luis was very good at hiding. Better than I taught him. Maria's mind reeled through memories, searching for cracks in the foundation of her childhood. Her father's paranoia about photographs, their frequent moves, the way he'd flinch whenever she asked about her mother, details that had seemed like quirks suddenly snapping into focus as evidence of elaborate deception. The people chasing you now, the woman continued, they're not the enemy, Maria. They're my team. The same investigation your father abandoned is still active, still hunting the network that's been stealing cultural treasures for 40 years. The Olympic Vault was just their American storage facility. The man beside her spoke for the first time, his voice carrying authority that made Maria's gymnastics-trained spine straighten involuntarily. Agent Elena Vasquez, Interpol Cultural Crimes Division, and you're Maria Vasquez Santos, though you've never known your real surname. Elena. The name her father used to whisper sometimes in his sleep, the name that would make him stare out windows for hours afterward. Maria had always assumed it was grief. She'd never considered it might be guilt. The evidence your father collected, Elena continued. It was never meant to expose the conspiracy. It was meant to protect himself and you from the network's retaliation. Insurance, not revelation. Maria looked down at the scattered papers, seeing them differently now. Not the righteous documentation of a whistleblower, but the desperate contingency plan of a man who'd betrayed everything he'd once believed in for love. So, everything. Maria's voice came out as a whisper. Everything I thought about my father, about myself, about why we were running, it was all lies? Elena stepped closer, her hand extended but not quite touching. Not lies, mija. Love. Confused, selfish, destructive love, but love nonetheless. The Spanish endearment hit Maria like a physical blow, carrying the weight of a mother's voice she'd never consciously remembered, but somehow recognized in her bones. Emma looked between the two women, her mother and grandmother, with the intuitive understanding of a child watching her world reshape itself around truths too large for any 8-year-old to comprehend. Everything had changed. Everything. The silence stretched between them like a chasm bridging 32 years of separation. Maria stared at Elena, her mother, alive, real, standing 3 feet away in a downtown Los Angeles alley that smelled of garbage and broken dreams. Emma's weight in her arms felt like the only solid thing in a world that had just revealed itself to be built on quicksand. I need to sit down, Maria whispered. Elena nodded toward the black sedan. We have somewhere safe, somewhere we can talk properly. Safe. The word tasted foreign in Maria's mouth. She'd been running for days, paranoid about every shadow, every phone call, every stranger's glance. The idea that safety might actually exist seemed like another elaborate deception. How do I know you're telling the truth? How do I know this isn't just another layer of the conspiracy? Elena reached into her coat again, this time producing a worn leather wallet. She flipped it open to reveal an Interpol identification card and badge, but beneath that, tucked into a clear plastic sleeve, was another photograph. This one showing Elena and Luis together, both younger, both wearing the formal uniforms of law enforcement. They looked happy. They looked like partners who trusted each other completely. Your father wasn't a criminal, Maria. He was an agent who chose love over duty. Elena's voice carried the weight of professional disappointment and personal heartbreak in equal measure. I've spent 3 decades trying to decide whether I can forgive him for that choice. Maria's gymnastics training had taught her to read body language, to sense deception in the smallest movements. Elena stood with the confident posture of someone accustomed to authority, but her hands trembled slightly when she spoke about Luis. Grief and anger and love, all tangled together in the way only family could manage. The vault, Maria said slowly. The evidence, all of it. You already knew. We've been monitoring the Olympic storage facility for 18 months. When the seismic sensors detected unauthorized access 3 nights ago, we assumed it was the network moving assets. Elena glanced at her partner. We never imagined it was Luis's daughter finally finding what he'd hidden. Emma stirred in Maria's arms, her 8-year-old attention span finally overcoming her terror. "Are you really my grandma?" The question hit Elena like a physical blow. She knelt slowly until she was at Emma's eye level, her professional composure cracking to reveal something raw and vulnerable underneath. "Yes, pequeña. I'm your abuela. I've been looking for you for your entire life." Emma studied Elena's face with the brutal honesty of childhood. "You have Mommy's eyes, and my eyes too. We're family," Elena said simply. "Complicated, broken, scattered family, but family nonetheless." Maria felt something inside her chest loosening, a tension she'd carried so long she'd forgotten it was there. The paranoia that had driven her father, the constant sense of danger lurking just beyond perception, it had been real, but it hadn't been the whole truth. "The network," Maria said, helping Emma down and gathering the scattered papers from the messenger bag. "The people who actually killed my father, they're still out there?" Elena's partner spoke up. Dr. Marcus Webb, former IOC cultural advisor. Senator Patricia Hensley, who chaired the Olympic Oversight Committee in the 80s. At least a dozen others across 6 countries. Your father's evidence could finally give us enough to bring them down. Maria looked at the documents with new understanding. Not just her inheritance, but ammunition in a war that had been raging since before she was born. Why now? Why come for me instead of letting me stumble around in the dark? Because 3 days ago someone accessed Dr. Webb's personal files remotely. Downloaded everything related to Luis Santos and his family. Elena's expression hardened. "They know you exist, Maria. They know about Emma. The network that killed your father is mobilizing to eliminate the last threat to their operation." The words sent ice through Maria's veins. She'd thought the danger was theoretical, something she could outrun or outwit through careful planning. But if professional killers were already hunting them, "We need to disappear again," Maria said. "New identities, new lives, just like my father did." "No." Elena's voice carried absolute authority. "Running didn't work for Luis, and it won't work for you. The network has resources he never imagined. Facial recognition software, digital tracking, international cooperation. You can't hide from them in the modern world." "Then what do you suggest?" Elena smiled for the first time since the alley confrontation began, and Maria saw herself in that expression. The same stubborn determination that had carried her through years of gymnastics training and single motherhood. "We fight back. We use your father's evidence to expose them completely. We end this conspiracy once and for all." Maria looked down at Emma, who was listening to every word with the intense focus of a child trying to understand an adult world that had suddenly become her reality. "What if we lose? Then at least we lose fighting instead of running. And Emma grows up, knowing her family stood for something." Maria stared at Elena's determined expression, seeing echoes of her own face in the older woman's features. The weight of 32 years of deception pressed down on her shoulders like a physical burden. But underneath the shock and anger, something else was emerging, a fierce resolve that felt familiar yet foreign. "Fighting back means putting Emma in danger," Maria said, her voice steady despite the chaos in her heart. "These people killed my father. They won't hesitate to hurt her." "They're already hunting her." Elena's tone was matter-of-fact, professional. "The moment you accessed that vault, Emma became a target. The only choice now is whether we face them from a position of strength or weakness." Emma tugged at Maria's sleeve. "Mommy, I'm scared." Maria knelt beside her daughter, smoothing back the dark hair that was so much like her own. Like Elena's. "I know, baby. But sometimes being brave means doing the right thing even when we're scared. Like when you went into the big scary building during the storm." The innocent question cut deep. Had it really been only 3 days since Maria had broken into the Olympic Stadium, desperate and hopeless, thinking her biggest problem was unpaid rent? That version of herself seemed like a stranger now, a woman who'd believed her father was a simple security guard, who'd thought her mother was dead, who'd never imagined her family's history stretched across decades of international conspiracy. "Yes," Maria said softly. Exactly like that. Elena watched the exchange with hungry eyes, as if trying to memorize every gesture, every word. 32 years of missed birthdays, scraped knees, bedtime stories, and proud moments. A grandmother's worth of love, compressed into this single desperate afternoon. The safe house is 20 minutes from here, Elena's partner said, checking his phone. But we need to move soon. The network has surveillance assets throughout the city. Maria stood, the messenger bag heavy in her hands. Inside were the documents that had cost her father his life, the evidence that had shaped her entire existence without her knowledge. But they were also the key to ending this nightmare once and for all. If we do this, Maria said, if we really fight back, what does that look like? I'm not a trained agent. I'm a waitress who used to do gymnastics. Elena's smile returned, warmer this time. You're Luis Santos's daughter and Elena Vasquez's daughter. You have more training than you realize. She gestured to the way Maria held herself, alert and balanced despite exhaustion. Your father taught you to be aware, to notice details, to trust your instincts. Your gymnastics gave you physical skills most people can only dream of, and your years as a single mother taught you to fight for what matters most. Maria felt something clicking into place, like a tumbler in a lock. All those childhood lessons her father had disguised as games, how to spot surveillance, how to disappear in crowds, how to remember details under pressure. She'd thought he was just paranoid. In reality, he'd been preparing her for exactly this moment. The evidence we have, Maria said. How do we use it? If these people are as powerful as you say, they'll have lawyers, connections, ways to make problems disappear. Not if we expose everything at once. Simultaneous releases to media outlets in 6 countries, coordinated with law enforcement raids on their facilities. We don't give them time to cover up or eliminate witnesses. Elena's voice carried the confidence of someone who'd spent decades planning this moment. But we need your father's files to make it work. The financial records, the shipping manifests, the communication logs. They're the final pieces of the puzzle. Emma had been listening with the serious attention of a child trying to understand adult complexities. Now she spoke up with startling clarity. The bad people hurt Grandpa Luis because he wanted to tell the truth? Yes, pequeña. And now they want to hurt Mommy for the same reason? Yes. Emma nodded gravely, her 8-year-old face set with determination that was purely Santos stubbornness. Then we have to stop them, because truth is more important than being safe. The words hit Maria like a revelation. Her daughter, brave, innocent Emma, understood something that had taken Maria 3 days of running and hiding to grasp. This wasn't about vengeance or money or even justice in the abstract. It was about the simple principle that truth mattered more than comfort. Maria looked at Elena, seeing not just her mother but a partner, an ally, someone who never stopped fighting for what was right, even when it cost her everything she loved. Okay, Maria said, shouldering the messenger bag with new purpose. Let's finish what my father started. Elena's eyes filled with tears. Relief, pride, and fierce maternal love all mixed together. Luis would be proud of you. I hope so. Maria took Emma's hand, ready to walk toward whatever came next. Because I'm about to bet everything we have that he raised me right. The black sedan waited, engine running, ready to carry them toward a confrontation 32 years in the making. The sedan's interior smelled of leather and coffee, sterile efficiency masking the weight of what they were driving toward. Elena sat across from Maria and Emma, her fingers drumming against a tablet displaying surveillance feeds, satellite imagery, and documents that made Maria's head spin with their complexity. The network's primary coordination hub is here, Elena said, pointing to an aerial view of a gleaming downtown high-rise, 23rd floor. Webb's private consulting firm serves as their front operation. Maria studied the building, her gymnast's eye automatically calculating distances, angles, potential routes. How do we get inside? I'm guessing they don't exactly welcome walk-in visitors. They're expecting you, Elena's partner said from the driver's seat. His name was Agent Rivera, Maria had learned, and he spoke with the calm precision of someone accustomed to impossible situations. Webb received word about the vault breach within hours. He knows Luis Santos's daughter is alive, and he knows she has the evidence. So this is a trap. Every good plan is a trap for someone, Elena replied. The question is who springs it first. Emma pressed against Maria's side, clutching a small tablet Elena had given her. Instead of games, it displayed a simple communication app, a lifeline to Interpol's tactical team. Maria had argued against bringing her daughter anywhere near the operation, but Elena's logic was unassailable. The safest place for Emma was with them, where trained agents could protect her. The beauty of your father's evidence, Elena continued, is that Webb doesn't know exactly what we have. He assumes Luis documented everything. The financial transfers, the shipping routes, the political connections. But he can't be certain without seeing the files himself. Maria opened the messenger bag, spreading the documents across the seat between them. Bank statements from Swiss accounts, shipping manifests for artifacts moving through Long Beach, correspondence between IOC officials and private collectors. 32 years of meticulous record-keeping, disguised as a father's paranoid obsession but actually representing a masterclass in criminal investigation. These communication logs, Elena said, pointing to a thick folder Maria had barely examined. Do you understand what they are? Maria scanned the pages. Transcripts of phone calls, encrypted message exchanges, meeting notes written in her father's careful handwriting. Names and dates going back to 1984, continuing right up until the week before his death. He was still collecting evidence, Maria realized. Even after he disappeared with me. Even while he was pretending to be a suburban security guard. Luis never stopped being an agent, Elena said softly. He just became a deep-cover asset who forgot to report in. These logs prove the network is still active, still stealing, still killing anyone who threatens to expose them. The sedan turned onto a busy street, lined with government buildings and corporate offices. Maria could see their destination now, a tower of glass and steel that looked like every other monument to American business success. Nothing about it suggested international conspiracy or murder. The plan is simple, Rivera explained. We walk through the front door, request a meeting with Dr. Webb regarding recently discovered Olympic artifacts. He'll assume Maria is trying to negotiate, sell the evidence in exchange for safety. But instead, Elena smiled, and Maria saw something predatory in the expression. Instead, we're wearing recording devices connected to satellite uplinks. Every word Webb says, every admission he makes, goes directly to law enforcement agencies in 6 countries simultaneously. By the time he realizes what's happening, arrest warrants will already be in motion. Emma looked up from her tablet, her 8-year-old face serious beyond her years. What if the bad man doesn't tell the truth? What if he pretends to be good? Then we make him angry, Elena said. Angry people say things they shouldn't. And your grandfather's evidence will make Dr. Webb very, very angry. The sedan pulled into an underground parking garage, and Maria felt her heart rate spike. This was really happening. After 3 days of running and hiding, she was about to walk directly into the center of the conspiracy that had shaped her entire life. Remember, Elena said, checking the small recording device clipped to Maria's collar, Webb thinks you're Luis's desperate daughter, in over her head and looking for an exit strategy. Let him believe that. Let him think he's winning right up until the moment we destroy him. Maria took Emma's hand, drawing strength from her daughter's unwavering trust. Everything she'd learned over the past 3 days, about her father's true identity, about her mother's survival, about the vast network of corruption that had murdered the people she loved, had led to this moment. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime. 23 floors to go, and 32 years of lies to unravel. Ready? Elena asked. Maria shouldered the messenger bag one last time, feeling the weight of evidence that could topple governments and expose decades of theft. Her father had died protecting these secrets. Now she would use them to ensure his death meant something. Let's finish this. The elevator rose in silence. each floor marked by a soft chime that seemed to count down the seconds, until Maria would face the man who had ordered her father's death. 23 floors had never felt so endless or so brief. "Remember your gymnastics training," Elena whispered, as the numbers climbed past 15. "Balance, focus, trust your instincts." Maria's palms were slick with sweat, but her breathing remained steady. Years of competitive pressure had taught her to function through fear, to perform when everything depended on perfect execution. This was just another routine, she told herself, the most important routine of her life. The doors opened to reveal a reception area that screamed expensive taste. Marble floors, abstract art, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. A young woman behind a sleek desk smiled with practiced professionalism. "Miss Santos? Dr. Webb is expecting you." Maria felt Emma's small hand tighten in hers. Her daughter had been remarkably brave, but the weight of the situation pressed down on all of them like a physical force. Rivera positioned himself near the elevator, casual but alert. Elena moved to Maria's left, playing the role of family attorney. The receptionist led them down a hallway lined with photographs, Olympic ceremonies, medal presentations, smiling officials shaking hands with world leaders. Maria recognized some of the faces from her father's files. How many of these people had blood on their hands? "Dr. Webb will see you now." The office door opened to reveal a man in his 70s, silver-haired and distinguished, wearing a tailored suit that probably cost more than Maria's rent. He stood behind a massive desk, hands clasped, expression carefully neutral. This was Marcus Webb, architect of 32 years of theft and murder, now playing the role of concerned businessman. "Miss Santos, I'm so sorry for your loss." His voice carried just the right note of sympathy, practiced and hollow. "Please, sit. And this must be Emma." The way he said her daughter's name made Maria's skin crawl. Too familiar, too knowing. "Dr. Webb." Maria took the offered chair, keeping Emma close, the messenger bag on her lap. "Thank you for seeing us on short notice." "Of course. I understand you've come into possession of some items that belong to your father." Webb's eyes never left the bag. "Security work can be complicated. Sometimes people acquire things they shouldn't have." Elena leaned forward slightly. "My client is hoping to resolve this matter quietly, for her daughter's sake." Webb's smile was predatory. "I'm sure we can reach an understanding. Your father was a good man, Miss Santos. Misguided, perhaps, but well-intentioned. I'd hate to see his family suffer for his mistakes." The casual dismissal of Luis Santos, the reduction of a man's life and sacrifice to a simple mistake, ignited something fierce in Maria's chest. Her father had died protecting people, exposing corruption, fighting for truth. This monster spoke of him like a wayward employee who'd stolen office supplies. "What kind of understanding?" Maria asked, her voice steady despite the rage building inside her. "Financial compensation for your cooperation. A comfortable life for you and Emma. All you need to do is return what doesn't belong to you and forget these unfortunate circumstances ever occurred." Emma shifted in her chair, her child's intuition sensing the wrongness beneath Webb's polished exterior. Maria felt her daughter's fear and transformed it into fuel for what came next. "The files my father kept," Maria said slowly. "They're quite detailed. Bank records, shipping manifests, communication logs, 32 years of very interesting business relationships." Webb's smile faltered for just a moment. "Your father was paranoid, Miss Santos. He saw conspiracies where none existed, kept records of perfectly legitimate transactions, and convinced himself they represented something sinister. Is that what you told yourself when you had him killed?" The words hung in the air like a physical presence. Webb's mask slipped, revealing something cold and calculating underneath the grandfatherly facade. "Accidents happen," he said quietly. "Your father was driving in dangerous conditions. Poor visibility. These things are tragic but not uncommon." Elena's hand moved almost imperceptibly to her collar, ensuring the recording device was capturing every word. This was it, the moment they'd planned for, the admission that would bring down everything. "Just like the accident that ended my gymnastics career," Maria pressed, poor timing, equipment failure. Another tragedy. Webb stood slowly, his friendly demeanor evaporating entirely. "You're playing a dangerous game, Miss Santos. Your father thought he was cleverer than he was. Look how that ended, with evidence that will destroy you and everyone you work with. Evidence that no one will ever see if you're not careful." Webb's voice carried naked menace now. "Accidents can happen to anyone, even little girls who ask too many questions." The threat against Emma shattered Maria's last restraint. She rose from her chair with fluid grace, every muscle trained by years of athletic discipline now coiled for action. "Try it," she said, her voice deadly quiet. "I dare you." Webb reached for something beneath his desk, and Maria moved. Her gymnast's reflexes kicked in before conscious thought could interfere. Maria vaulted over Webb's desk in a single fluid motion, landing with both feet on his chair as he fumbled for what she now saw was a panic button. Her momentum carried her forward, and she grabbed his wrist, twisting it away from the device with precise leverage that sent him stumbling backward. "Elena, now!" Maria shouted. Elena was already moving, pulling Emma toward the door as Rivera burst into the office, weapon drawn. But Webb wasn't finished. Despite his age, he moved with surprising speed, lunging for a different button, this one red, mounted on the wall behind his chair. Maria threw herself between Webb and the alarm, but she was a fraction of a second too late. His finger hit the button, and somewhere in the building, silent alerts began flashing to security teams who had been waiting for exactly this moment. "You stupid girl," Webb snarled, his grandfatherly mask completely gone now. "Do you have any idea what you've just triggered?" The building's fire alarm began blaring. Not a real emergency, Maria realized, but a signal for evacuation that would bring armed men running while clearing out innocent civilians. Through the office's floor-to-ceiling windows, she could see black SUVs converging on the street below. "Rivera," Elena called from the doorway. "We've got company coming up the emergency stairs." Maria's mind raced through options, calculating escape routes and timing like she was planning a gymnastics routine. But this wasn't a gymnasium, and failure here meant death, not just for her, but for Emma. "The evidence," Webb said, stepping toward the messenger bag that had fallen during the struggle. "Give it to me, and I'll let you walk out of here. Continue this foolishness, and your daughter will suffer the same fate as your father." The recording device on Elena's collar was still transmitting. Maria could see the tiny LED light blinking steadily. Every word Webb spoke was being captured, broadcast to law enforcement agencies across multiple countries. But what good would that evidence do if none of them survived to see it used? Emma stood frozen in the doorway, her 8-year-old face pale with terror, but her eyes still blazing with Santos' stubbornness. In that moment, Maria saw her father's expression, the same look he must have worn in his final moments, choosing principle over survival. The choice crystallized with perfect clarity. "Elena," Maria said quietly, never taking her eyes off Webb. "Take Emma and go. Now." "Maria, no. The evidence is already out there. The recording is still transmitting. Your job now is to make sure Emma lives to see these bastards pay for what they've done." Webb smiled coldly, noble sentiment. "But no one's going anywhere." The office door slammed open, and 3 men in tactical gear poured in, weapons raised. Rivera spun to face them, his own gun drawn, but the math was brutally simple. He might take 1, maybe 2, but not all 3, not with Elena and Emma in the line of fire. Maria made her choice. She grabbed the messenger bag and dove toward the floor-to-ceiling window, her gymnast's training calculating trajectory and force even as she moved. The glass was reinforced, designed to withstand earthquakes and high winds, but not the impact of a desperate woman with nothing left to lose. "Stop her!" Webb screamed. Maria hit the window with her shoulder, using momentum and leverage to spiderweb the glass. It held for a heartbeat, then gave way in a cascade of glittering shards. 23 stories of empty air yawned below her, and for an instant she was flying, just like on the uneven bars, that moment of perfect weightlessness between release and catch. But there would be no catch this time. The messenger bag flew from her hands, scattering documents into the wind like confetti. Bank records, shipping manifests, communication logs, 32 years of evidence floating away on the downtown breeze, some pieces dancing toward the street, others caught by wind currents and carried toward the adjacent buildings where Elena's backup teams were positioned. Maria's hand shot out, grabbing the window frame as her body swung out into empty space. Glass cut into her palm, and her shoulder screamed in protest, but she held on. 23 stories down, she could see Rivera's tactical team flooding into the building, responding to the transmitted alert. Behind her, in the office, she heard Webb's voice rising to a panicked shriek. "Get the documents. All of them. Every piece." But it was too late. The evidence was scattered to the wind, literally and figuratively. Elena had Emma. The recording was still transmitting. And sometimes Maria realized as her grip began to slip, winning meant sacrificing everything to ensure the victory lasted. She looked up through the broken window and saw Emma's face, her daughter, her heart, her future, staring down with eyes full of love and terror. "I love you, pequeña," Maria whispered, and let go. The wind caught Maria's body for 3 endless seconds before the emergency inflatable deployed by Rivera's tactical team broke her fall. She crashed into the massive cushion 20 stories down, the impact driving every molecule of air from her lungs and sending lightning bolts of pain through her ribs. But she was alive. Sirens wailed from every direction as federal agents swarmed the building. Maria rolled off the inflatable onto concrete, gasping, her vision blurred by shock and adrenaline. Above her, the scattered documents continued their chaotic dance through the air, some landing in agents' hands, others photographed as they fell, all of it being catalogued as evidence in what would become the largest international corruption case in Olympic history. "Maria!" Elena's voice cut through the chaos. She was running across the plaza, Emma in her arms, both of them safe and whole. Maria tried to sit up and immediately regretted it as her ribs protested violently. "Stay down," a paramedic ordered, appearing beside her with practiced efficiency. "Possible internal injuries, definite concussion. We need to get you to a hospital." "Emma," Maria croaked, reaching toward her daughter. "I'm here, Mama." Emma's small hand found hers, warm and real and grounding. "You flew like a superhero." "Are you okay?" Maria managed a laugh that turned into a wince. "I've been better, pequeña, but we're safe now. We're finally safe." Rivera appeared in her peripheral vision, speaking rapidly into his radio. "Webb is in custody. His security team surrendered when they realized federal agents had the building surrounded. The documents you scattered? Our people are collecting everything, and what we're seeing—" He shook his head in amazement. "Your father documented it all, Maria. Every crime, every payoff, every murder going back 3 decades. The paramedics loaded her onto a stretcher, but Maria kept hold of Emma's hand. As they wheeled her toward the ambulance, she could see the building's upper floors through the vehicle's rear windows. The broken window gaped like a wound against the glass facade, and she thought about the moment she'd let go, not just of the window frame, but of 32 years of fear and running. "The recording," she said to Elena, who was climbing into the ambulance beside them. "Did it work?" Elena's smile was fierce with satisfaction. Every word. Webb's confession, his threats against Emma, his admission of guilt in Luis's murder, it's all captured and already being shared with prosecutors in 6 countries. The man who killed your father just handed us everything we need to destroy his entire network. 3 hours later, Maria lay in a hospital bed with her arm in a sling and her ribs wrapped in tape, watching Emma color in a book that some kindly nurse had provided. The pain medication made everything soft around the edges, but her mind was crystal clear for the first time in years. "There's something else," Elena said quietly from the chair beside her bed. "About your mother." Maria's breath caught. Throughout everything, the vault, the chase, the evidence, the confrontation, the revelation that Carmen Santos might still be alive had been pushed to the background by more immediate dangers. "She's been under witness protection for 32 years, Elena continued. "Living in Portland under the name Carmen Rodriguez. She's a teacher now. Has been trying to find you and Luis ever since she discovered the fake death certificate was part of Webb's cover-up. Tears blurred Maria's vision. Her mother, alive, safe, waiting. "She wants to see you," Elena said gently. "Both of you, if you're ready." Emma looked up from her coloring book. "Mama, do I have a grandma?" "Yes, baby," Maria whispered, pulling her daughter close despite the protest from her ribs. "You have a grandma who's going to love you so much." The news played constantly on the hospital room's television. International arrests, Olympic medals being recovered from private collections, government officials resigning in disgrace. The conspiracy Luis Santos had died trying to expose was finally crumbling, 32 years of corruption unraveling in real time. But for Maria, the victory felt smaller and more personal. She had kept her promise to her father's memory. She had protected Emma. And somehow, impossibly, she had found her way back to a family she'd thought was lost forever. "What happens now?" she asked Elena. "Now you heal. You testify when the trials begin. You help us finish what your father started." Elena stood, gathering her things. "And you live the life Luis wanted for you, free from fear, surrounded by people who love you." Through the hospital window, Maria could see the city sprawling toward the horizon, full of ordinary people living ordinary lives. Tomorrow, she and Emma would join them. No more running, no more hiding, no more shadows from the past, just a mother and daughter, building something new from the ashes of everything they'd lost. Chapter 17. The Return. 3 weeks later, Maria stood in the doorway of a modest house in Portland, her heart hammering against her healing ribs. The woman who answered the door had silver-streaked hair and familiar dark eyes that had haunted Maria's childhood memories. Eyes she'd thought she'd never see again. "Mija," Carmen Santos whispered, and the word broke something open in Maria's chest that had been sealed shut for 32 years. They fell into each other's arms on the front porch, 32 years of grief and loss, and desperate hope pouring out in tears that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than bone. Maria breathed in her mother's scent, different now, unfamiliar perfume and laundry detergent, but underneath it, something that was purely, essentially Mom. "I thought you were dead," Maria sobbed against her mother's shoulder. "I thought I lost you forever." "I know, baby. I know. I thought the same about you." Carmen pulled back, cupping Maria's face in hands that trembled with emotion. "Look at you. You're so beautiful, so strong, just like I always knew you'd be." Emma hung back shyly, clutching her stuffed rabbit and studying this stranger who was supposedly her grandmother. Carmen noticed and knelt down slowly, her movements careful and non-threatening. "You must be Emma," she said softly. "I've been waiting a very long time to meet you." "Are you really my grandma?" Emma asked, her voice small but curious. "I am, and I love you already, even though we're just meeting. Would you like to see some pictures of your mama when she was your age?" The ice broke gradually over cups of hot chocolate and photo albums spread across Carmen's coffee table. Maria watched her daughter discover family history, pictures of Luis teaching a 6-year-old Maria to ride a bike, Christmas mornings in their old house, gymnastics meets where young Maria stood proudly on podiums with medals around her neck. "Mama, you were really good," Emma exclaimed, pointing at a photo of Maria mid-routine on the balance beam. "She was going to the Olympics," Carmen said quietly, her eyes meeting Maria's across the table. "Before everything happened." The weight of lost dreams hung in the air for a moment, but it felt different now. Not bitter or resentful, just past. Maria had spent so many years wondering what might have been, but sitting here with her daughter and her mother, she realized she'd found something better than what she'd lost. "Tell me about your life," Maria said. "All these years. Were you happy?" Carmen's smile was complicated. "Happy isn't the right word. I survived. I built something. I teach 2nd grade. Been at the same school for 15 years now. The kids don't know their teacher is living under witness protection, of course. To them, I'm just Mrs. Rodriguez who makes the best sugar cookies for the class parties. But were you lonely?" "Every day." Carmen's honesty was gentle but unflinching. "Every single day I wondered what happened to you and your father. Whether you were safe, whether you remembered me, whether I'd ever see you again. But I couldn't risk trying to find you. Webb's people were watching, and any attempt to make contact could have gotten you killed. Emma had fallen asleep against Maria's good arm, worn out by the emotional intensity of the day. Carmen fetched a blanket and tucked it around her granddaughter, with movements that spoke of years of caring for children. "She's perfect," Carmen whispered. "You did such a good job raising her alone." "I wasn't completely alone," Maria said, surprising herself with the realization. "I had you. The things you taught me before. Everything changed. How to be strong, how to fight for what matters, how to protect the people you love. That's what got us through." They talked deep into the evening, filling in gaps and sharing stories. Carmen told her about Luis, how he'd insisted on investigating the Olympic corruption even when she begged him to leave it alone, how he'd promised to expose everything and make the world safe for their daughter's future. Maria talked about the vault, the evidence, the moment she'd chosen to jump rather than let Webb win. "He would be so proud of you," Carmen said, tears shining in her eyes. "You finished what he started. You kept Emma safe. You brought justice for all of us. When it was time to leave, none of them wanted to say goodbye." They stood on the front porch again, the Oregon evening cool and sweet around them, and Maria felt something she hadn't experienced in years, the simple peace of belonging somewhere. "You don't have to go back to Los Angeles," Carmen said carefully. "I know you have a life there, but Portland isn't a bad place to start over. Good schools, nice people. And Emma would have her grandmother nearby." Maria looked down at her daughter, who was nodding sleepily against her hip. For the first time since discovering the vault, she thought about the future instead of just survival. What kind of life did she want to build? What kind of person did she want to be now that she was finally free? "We'll think about it," she said, and meant it. "We have time now to think about everything." The return flight to Los Angeles felt different. Maria wasn't running anymore. She was choosing, and that made all the difference in the world. Chapter 18, The New Beginning. 2 months later, Maria stood in the empty Los Angeles apartment that had been their refuge and prison for so many years. Cardboard boxes lined the walls, packed with the modest belongings she and Emma had accumulated: books, clothes, Emma's drawings, the few photographs that had survived their years of running. Sunlight streamed through windows that no longer needed their blinds drawn tight against watching eyes. "Mama, can I take this?" Emma held up a small, succulent plant that had somehow thrived despite their chaotic life, its thick leaves reaching stubbornly toward whatever light it could find. "Of course, pequeña. Grandma Carmen will help us find a good spot for it in the new house." The word grandma still felt like a small miracle on Maria's tongue. 3 weeks of phone calls, video chats, and weekend visits had woven Carmen back into their lives with surprising ease. Emma had taken to her grandmother with the fearless love of childhood, while Maria found herself rediscovering pieces of herself she'd thought were lost forever. The daughter who used to laugh easily, who believed good things could happen, who trusted that tomorrow would be better than today. Elena knocked on the open door, carrying coffee and wearing the satisfied expression of someone whose impossible case had finally closed. "The last of Webb's associates was arrested in Geneva this morning," she announced. "The investigation is officially complete." Maria felt the news settle into her bones like a weight she'd been carrying finally set down. "It's really over?" "It's really over. Webb and 12 other conspirators will spend the rest of their lives in prison. The stolen artifacts are being returned to their rightful owners and museums worldwide. And the Olympic Committee has established a victims' fund. Your father's name is being honored in their official apology." Elena's smile turned softer. "You did it, Maria. You finished what Luis started." Through the apartment's thin walls, Maria could hear the Morales family next door. Children laughing, dishes clattering, the comfortable chaos of people who didn't have to whisper or watch shadows. Soon another family would live here, and maybe they'd find the same safety in these rooms that Maria and Emma had discovered. But it was time to build something new. "There's one more thing," Elena said, producing an envelope from her jacket. "From the Victims Fund. It won't make up for what you lost, but it's a start. Maria opened the envelope and stared at the figure written on the check. Enough to buy a house in Portland. Enough to go back to school, maybe become a teacher like her mother. Enough to give Emma the stable childhood that Maria had never had but had always dreamed of providing. "What will you do now?" Elena asked. "Live," Maria said simply. "Just live." The moving truck arrived as the afternoon sun slanted golden through the apartment's windows. Maria watched strangers carry away the physical remnants of their old life, the second-hand furniture, the boxes of carefully guarded memories. Emma supervised from her perch on the window seat, chattering to anyone who would listen about her new school in Portland and the puppy Grandma Carmen had promised to help her pick out. As evening approached, Maria found herself alone in the empty apartment for the last time. She walked through rooms that had sheltered them through the worst years, running her fingers along walls that had heard Emma's laughter and her own tears, that had kept their secrets and protected their sleep. In Emma's room, she paused at the window where her daughter used to press her nose to the glass, dreaming of playgrounds she couldn't visit and friends she couldn't make. The view looked different now, not threatening but simply ordinary. Just another LA neighborhood where ordinary people lived ordinary lives. Her phone buzzed with a text from Carmen. "Flight delayed an hour, but we'll be there to pick you up. Emma's bed is already set up in her new room, and I made those chocolate chip cookies she loves." Maria smiled, typing back, "Thank you for everything. We'll see you soon." But first, she had one last thing to do. From her purse, she pulled out a small framed photo, the only picture she had of her father, taken at one of her childhood gymnastics meets. Luis Santos smiled up at her from behind the glass, his eyes bright with pride and stubborn determination. She'd carried it through years of hiding, drawing strength from his memory in moments when courage felt impossible. "We did it, Papa," she whispered to the photograph. "Emma is safe. The truth came out. And Mama, God, Papa, she's alive and she's amazing and she loves Emma so much already." Tears blurred her vision, but they were clean tears now, free of the bitter weight they'd carried for so long. "I think you'd like who I became. I think you'd be proud." She kissed the glass and tucked the photo back into her purse. Luis Santos would make the journey to Portland with them, not as a burden of unfinished business, but as a blessing, proof that love could survive anything, even death. Emma appeared in the doorway, backpack slung over her shoulder and stuffed rabbit tucked securely under her arm. "Ready, Mama?" Maria took one last look around the empty apartment, then reached for her daughter's hand. Outside, their taxi waited to take them to the airport, to the plane that would carry them home to Oregon and Carmen, and a future that belonged entirely to them. "Ready, pequeña." Together, they stepped into the hallway and closed the door behind them. The sound of the lock engaging felt like punctuation, not an ending, but the completion of one sentence before beginning another. In the elevator, Emma asked, "Mama, will you teach me gymnastics like Grandpa taught you?" Maria squeezed her daughter's hand, feeling the weight and promise of generations passing between them. "If you want to learn, I'll teach you everything I know, even the flying parts, especially the flying parts." The elevator doors opened onto the lobby, where late afternoon sunlight painted everything gold. Maria Santos walked into it, carrying her daughter's hand and her father's legacy, no longer running from the past but moving toward a future where Emma could grow up free, free to dream, to trust, to become whoever she wanted to be. Behind them, the building stood silent and ordinary, holding its secrets and sheltering new stories. Ahead lay Portland and Carmen and a life built not on fear, but on love. For the first time in 32 years, Maria Santos was going home.